Dave Henderson stood at the microphone, his voice steady but his hands shaking slightly. My family moved here because we thought Willowbrook was the kind of place where kids could be kids, where neighbors looked out for each other. We were wrong. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Karen kept her expression neutral, but her stomach churned as Dave continued. Someone destroyed my son's pool in the middle of the night, caused thousands of dollars in water damage to our home, and the only person who had a problem with that pool. He gestured toward the board table. Well, she's sitting right there. I had nothing to do with, Karen began, but her voice was drowned out by angry shouts. Liar. We have security footage. You've gone too far this time, Karen. Margaret Chen stood up from the crowd, her face flushed with embarrassment and anger. Karen, I've supported you for years, but this is insane. Mrs. Patterson has Ring doorbell footage of someone matching your description walking toward the Hendersons' house at 11:30 p.m. Karen's carefully constructed world began crumbling around her. That could be anyone. You can't prove. Actually, we can. Bob Martinez's voice was quiet, but carried clearly through the room. Your scissors were found in their backyard this morning. The ones with your initials engraved on them. The ones I watched you slide into your purse yesterday. The room fell silent. Karen felt her face burn as every eye in the community center focused on her. These people, her neighbors, her responsibility, were looking at her with disgust, disappointment, and something worse, pity. I was protecting our community, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. The rules exist for a reason. Property values, neighborhood standards. Bullshit. The profanity came from elderly Mrs. Chen, Margaret's mother-in-law, who'd never been heard to say anything stronger than fiddlesticks. You destroyed a child's happiness because you couldn't stand not getting your way. Tommy Henderson wiggled out of his mother's arms and walked toward the board table. The room held its breath as the 8-year-old approached Karen, his eyes wide and confused. Mrs. Karen, he said softly, why did you break my pool? Did I do something wrong? The question hit Karen like a sledgehammer. She looked into this child's innocent face and saw not defiance or rule-breaking, but simple confusion and hurt. For the first time in years, her armor of righteous indignation cracked completely. No, sweetie, she whispered, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. You didn't do anything wrong. I did. The admission seemed to drain all the fight out of her. Karen Whitmore, 3-term HOA president and neighborhood watchdog, crumpled in her chair as the weight of her actions finally hit home. I resign, she said quietly, then louder. I hereby resign from the Willowbrook Estates Board, effective immediately. Dave Henderson stepped forward, his anger tempered by unexpected sympathy. Karen, we don't want to destroy you. We just want to live in peace. I know, Karen replied, unable to meet his eyes. I know what I am. I know what I've become. And I don't know how to fix it. As the meeting dissolved into heated discussions about her replacement and policy changes, Karen slipped out through the back door. The summer evening was warm and peaceful, filled with the sounds of children playing and neighbors chatting over fence lines. All the life she tried so hard to regulate and control. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Pool's being replaced tomorrow. Tommy wants to know if you'd like to come to the reopening party. He says everyone deserves a second chance. Karen stared at the message for a long time, wondering if redemption was really that simple, or if some lines, once crossed, could never be uncrossed. Either way, she had a decision to make, and for the first time in years, the HOA handbook wouldn't help her make it. Karen Whitmore's coffee mug shattered against her pristine kitchen floor as she spotted the abomination through her window. There, in the Hendersons' backyard, at 1247 Maple Grove Lane, sat an enormous inflatable pool, complete with a slide, floating unicorns, and what appeared to be a tiki bar. Those absolute savages, she whispered, her manicured fingers trembling as she reached for her phone. The Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association Constitution was Karen's Bible, and she knew every line by heart. Section 4.27 clearly stated that any recreational water feature exceeding 6 feet in diameter required written approval from the Architectural Review Committee, And as HOA president for the past 3 years, Karen took violations personally. She speed-dialed Margaret Chen, her vice president and only remaining ally on the board. Maggie, drop everything. The Hendersons have committed an act of war. Karen, it's 7 in the morning. They've installed a swimming pool without permits. A pool, Margaret, in broad daylight, like common criminals. Through her binoculars, a Christmas gift from her late husband that she'd repurposed for neighborhood surveillance, Karen watched 8-year-old Tommy Henderson cannonball into the water while his parents sipped mimosas on inflatable flamingos. The audacity made her vision blur. By noon, Karen had assembled an emergency board meeting in her living room. Margaret sat uncomfortably on the plastic-covered sofa while Bob Martinez, the treasurer, tried to reason with their increasingly unhinged president. Maybe we could just send a friendly reminder about the permit process, Bob suggested. Karen's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. Friendly? Bob, they've turned our prestigious neighborhood into a water park. Property values are plummeting as we speak. It's just a pool, Karen. Kids are having fun. Fun? Karen's voice pitched higher. Fun is following the rules. Fun is maintaining standards. Fun is not turning Willowbrook Estates into some trailer park paradise. She pulled out a thick folder labeled Henderson Violations and slammed it on her coffee table. Late garbage pickup in March, unapproved garden gnome in April, and now this aquatic nightmare. They show nothing but contempt for our community guidelines. Margaret shifted nervously. What exactly are you proposing? Karen's smile was predatory. Complete removal. Today, they have until sunset to drain that monstrosity and return our neighborhood to respectability, or they'll face the full consequences of their actions. And if they refuse? Bob asked, though he already dreaded the answer. Then I'll show them what happens when you cross the Willowbrook Estates HOA. Karen's eyes gleamed with dangerous determination. Some people only learn through consequences, and the Hendersons are about to get the education of their lives. As the emergency meeting concluded, neither Margaret nor Bob noticed Karen sliding a pair of heavy-duty scissors into her purse, or the way she lingered at her window, watching the Henderson children splash innocently in their doomed paradise. At precisely 3:47 p.m., Karen marched across the street wearing her official HOA blazer and carrying a clipboard thick with documentation. The sound of children's laughter from the backyard made her jaw clench tighter with each step. She didn't bother with the front door. Excuse me. Karen's voice cut through the afternoon air like a fire alarm. This is an official HOA inspection. Dave Henderson nearly choked on his beer as Karen rounded the corner of his house, her sensible heels clicking against his patio stones. His wife Jessica looked up from her magazine, sunglasses sliding down her nose in disbelief. Karen, what are you doing in our backyard? Jessica asked, sitting up straighter. Documenting violations. Karen's pen moved furiously across her clipboard. Unpermitted recreational water feature, non-approved pool accessories, potential noise ordinance violations. And she gestured dramatically at Dave's Bluetooth speaker, unauthorized amplification devices. Dave stood up slowly, water dripping from his swim trunks. Are you seriously doing this right now? Our kids are playing. Your children are swimming in an illegal structure that poses safety hazards and violates at least 7 community standards. Karen's voice never wavered. Section 4.27 requires written approval for any water feature exceeding 6 feet in diameter. Yeah, you mentioned that in your voice message, and your text, and your email. Jessica's tone had shifted from confusion to irritation. We got the message, Karen. Then why? Karen stepped closer to the pool's edge. Is this still here? Tommy Henderson popped up from underwater, his face bright with innocent joy. Hi, Mrs. Karen. Want to try the slide? It's super fun. For a moment, something flickered across Karen's face, a shadow of warmth, maybe even longing. But it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Young man, you need to exit this unauthorized swimming apparatus immediately. Karen, you're scaring our kid, Dave said, moving protectively toward his son. I'm enforcing community standards that every resident agreed to follow when they purchased their home. Karen's clipboard shook slightly in her hands. standards that maintain property values and neighborhood character. Jessica stood up, her patience finally snapping. You know what maintains neighborhood character? Families actually enjoying their homes instead of living in fear of some power-hungry busybody with too much time on her hands. The words hit Karen like a physical blow. Power-hungry? I've dedicated 3 years of my life to preserving what makes this community special. While you've been here for what, 6 months? Some of us understand the responsibility that comes with living in Willowbrook Estates. The responsibility to be miserable. Dave stepped forward. Karen, when's the last time you actually enjoyed yourself? When's the last time you had fun? Karen's composure cracked for just an instant. Fun doesn't pay for street maintenance. Fun doesn't keep home values stable. Fun doesn't. She stopped herself, realizing she was shouting. You have until midnight to remove this installation, she said, regaining her formal tone. After that, the HOA will take appropriate action. What kind of action? Jessica demanded. Karen turned to leave, then paused at the gate, the kind that people remember. As she walked away, her hands trembling with rage and something else she couldn't quite name, Karen didn't see Dave pull out his phone to call his lawyer brother-in-law. She also didn't notice Margaret Chen watching from across the street, her face filled with growing concern about what her old friend might do next. At 11:43 p.m., Karen crept through her neighbor's side yard dressed in black yoga pants and a dark hoodie, her heart hammering against her ribs. The Henderson house was dark except for a single porch light, and the massive inflatable pool glowed softly under the motion sensor floodlights. She'd spent the evening researching HOA enforcement precedents, but every legal avenue would take weeks or months. The pool would stay up through the entire summer, mocking her authority every single day. Other residents would see the Hendersons getting away with blatant rule violations, and soon Willowbrook Estates would descend into chaos. Karen couldn't let that happen. She wouldn't. The scissors felt heavy in her pocket as she approached the pool's edge. Just a few strategic cuts to the main air chambers, and the Hendersons would wake up to deflated ruins. Problem solved, authority restored, order maintained. She knelt beside the pool and pulled out the scissors, their chrome surface catching the moonlight. But as she positioned the blades against the vinyl, she caught her reflection in the water, wild-eyed, crouched in someone else's yard in the middle of the night, about to destroy a child's toy. What am I doing? The thought hit her like cold water. She sat back on her heels, scissors trembling in her hands. When had enforcing rules become this? When had she become the kind of person who snuck around in the dark, planning acts of petty destruction? A sound from inside the house made her freeze. Footsteps on stairs, then a light in the kitchen window. Someone was getting a glass of water, maybe checking on the kids. Karen held her breath, perfectly still, until the light went out and silence returned. But the moment of clarity was gone, replaced by burning humiliation. Here she was, a respected community leader, hiding in bushes like some common vandal. This was what the Hendersons had reduced her to. This was their fault. The scissors bit through the vinyl with a sharp hiss. Air rushed out in a violent whoosh, and the pool began collapsing in on itself. Karen moved quickly, puncturing 3 more chambers before the unicorn float deflated with a pathetic squeak. Pool water gushed across the patio, carrying plastic toys and foam noodles in its wake. She stood there breathing hard, watching thousands of gallons flood the Hendersons' backyard and seep toward their foundation. The destruction was more complete than she'd intended. The pool was utterly ruined, but so was their patio, their garden, and probably their basement. Good, she thought savagely. Let them deal with the mess they created. But as she turned to leave, Karen caught sight of a child's drawing taped to the kitchen window. A crayon masterpiece showing a stick figure family playing in a blue rectangle labeled HOA. Tommy's artwork, probably drawn that very afternoon. Something cold settled in her stomach, but she pushed it down. Rules were rules. Actions had consequences. The Hendersons had forced her hand. She slipped back through the shadows to her own house, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that child's drawing, heard Tommy's excited voice asking if she wanted to try the slide. At 6 a.m., her phone exploded with calls. Margaret, hysterical. Bob, demanding to know if she'd lost her mind. And then Jessica Henderson, her voice shaking with fury and something that might have been heartbreak. My son is crying, Karen. He thinks someone hates him enough to destroy his favorite thing in the world. How do I explain that to an 8-year-old? Karen hung up and turned off her phone, but she couldn't silence the voice in her head asking the same question. How did she explain this to herself? Part 4. The Reckoning. The Willowbrook Estates Community Center hadn't seen a crowd this large since the Great Mailbox controversy of 2019. Every seat was filled, with residents spilling into the aisles and clustering near the doors. Karen sat alone at the board table, her usual stack of perfectly organized documents providing little comfort as hostile eyes bore into her from all directions.